One thing that's been very encouraging for me this week was to see that Trump, not that we thought that he was going to let it go, but he's not letting it go. He's not letting 2020 and the truth about what happened go. We saw him on Bret Baier this week, which I find very ironic because Bret Baier has been the captain of Let's Deny the 2020 was rigged. But he went on his show and told him face to face that the country wouldn't be in this shape if 2020 was not rigged. How do you think, at what point does this start coming into affecting these secretaries of state, these different states? Because the rig didn't necessarily happen only in a centralized location. The states had to have been a party to it.
Danielle, if I can, I think you're right. And if you look at, I don't know if you watched Mark Mitchell this morning out of Asmussen on Bannon, and he was the most opinionated I've ever seen. And usually, he's a kind of a pollster. Hey, the numbers say this. But what the numbers say, because it was personal to him, he goes, these people, the amount of they stole money from my kids and sending them God knows where, enriching themselves. And as he said, we're at the end of the fourth turning. We thought that would be a World War III. We thought that would be maybe a financial collapse. No, it is this.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're running behind because tech has plagued us this morning, but we have found a way around it, and we have a real treat for you. We are talking with good friends of the show, Juan Savin and Meck. Juan, I know you can't see him on the screen. He's having to join us by Bluetooth because of those tech issues, but we've overcome. So we will be discussing today the latest on Tina Peters and on our election system and the ongoing dismantling of the deep state. I'm really looking forward to the discussion and to the insights from these guys. Before we get into it, let me read the scripture of the day. It is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. This is a familiar one to all of you, I know. It says, "Most of all, I'm writing to encourage you to pray with gratitude to God. Pray for all men with all forms of prayers and requests as you intercede with intense passion. And pray for every political leader and representative so that we would be able to live tranquil, undisturbed lives as we worship the awe-inspiring God with pure hearts. It is pleasing to our Savior God to pray for them. He longs for everyone to embrace his life and return to the full knowledge of the truth." And as this administration is driving so hard and so fast to dismantle evil that's been pervasive in our government structures, it's vital that we pray for them. We need to pray for their safety, for their wisdom, for them to be surrounded by wise counsel. We need to be praying that the moles and the rats in the inner circles and throughout government are smoked out, exposed, and thrown out. And we've said it since the election, and you may get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm not going to stop saying it. We cannot slow down. We cannot back off of any of our efforts for advocacy. We have to keep pushing harder than we pushed before. And this is the same. It's also true for prayer, right? It's absolutely critical that we support these men and women who are putting literally everything on the line to dismantle the deep state, to uncover evil, and to restore true justice to our nation. We also need to pray for the weasels and the rats in power that we can't even stand the sight of. I know several come to mind because the scripture instructs us to, not because we feel like it, but because the scripture instructs us to, and because we have no idea who the Lord may turn from a Saul to a Paul. So our job is to just be obedient in that.
Absolutely. And Danielle, these are, while we're praying for our adversaries, and we clearly know who they are now, they've never been more clearly defined than they are now. They are like cats backed into a corner. I sense a deep state sense of panic, confusion, and fear. People sometimes do very, very extreme things when they're desperate. And these people are becoming, in my view, increasingly desperate. And we have to remain vigilant and continue moving forward on the right path. That is so important. This is no time to rest at this point. As you mentioned earlier, Matt Meck and Juan, Savin, great friends of our show. Welcome both to the State of Freedom.
Hey, thank you for
fun to be here.
having us both on. I think that the last time we were on, I was driving a very large Grand Wagoneer. Juan was navigating, and my nephew was in the back seat.
Y'all did so well.
And we got it done then. And
Well,
we're
I
going
can
to
tell you
get
right
it done.
now, I'm here on the beach watching the moon set. The sun hasn't risen yet, but there's a great, big, huge moon. It's getting more and more yellow right now. And in about 5 minutes, it's going to turn very blood red and disappear into the mist at the edge of the horizon here. So you guys, it's probably broad daylight, but for me, it's still night.
What a view. What a view you have, Juan. Let me start right at the top here because this has been on many people's minds. Tina Peters, I know both of you were involved in the effort and are continuing to be involved in the effort to get Tina Peters out of jail, this horrific injustice that's been done to her. The State of Freedom was one of the stream partners for the Let My Tina Peters Go event. Tell us about the event and where are we now in getting her out of jail and rectifying this horrible injustice?
I'll let you go, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say, Juan, Chris and Danielle, the aggregate numbers, Mark Cook, who had shared with me, he helped through Joe Altman graciously allowed, use his studios for the production. Mark kind of was the lead producer to get all those moving parts to work together. And because of that support, you all, the podcasters who joined in to stream that thing, the initial numbers that I was getting from them, looks like about 2.5 million people
Amazing.
were watching that to keep certainly folks aware, because there was a misconception. I know when we were in the Virginia area, out by Dulles, and Professor Clements had joined us latter into that week after the J6s were released, and he came and stayed at the home we were all courted at. A very wonderful couple who just offered everything for us, and they paid everything, and they allowed us to be there to host it. The effort on Tina, a lot of folks were confused in the country. They thought, well, she was released with the J6ers,
Right.
or Trump's already pardoned her, not realizing she's in a different category. Once she wasn't a J6er per se. She wasn't there detained, investigated, put through a kangaroo court and put in the DC gulag, but she was in a Colorado state court, and therefore the president can't pardon, as Sir Chris knows, certainly can't pardon a state charge. So, we have made some coordinated efforts. I think I was sharing with some of the folks probably about 2 weeks ago now. Bannon called me like at 5:35 in the morning. My phone's going off. And he was frustrated about, in physics we call it Brownian motion, right? A lot of activity but no vector.
Yeah.
And he says, Matt, you can speak in my name. You got my authority. What are we doing to help her? So I kind of wrote him a paper and said, here's kind of things that we're looking at. Again, we're not speaking for the administration. We're not speaking for the DOJ. We don't know. It's just what we're looking at from the outside in. One was President Trump having a conversation with Governor Polis. And from what I understand, not that Trump called Polis, but a lot of Polis.
Juan, we're getting some interference from you. Maybe you want to be on mute for in the meantime.
There we go.
I think you got him. Yeah.
So his office has received a lot of correspondence on respectfully, politely saying, hey, do the right thing. If you want to bring the country together, at a minimum, release her on bond as she's pending her appeal. She's never had not even a traffic ticket. I mean, she's not a flight threat. She Gold Star mom. Do that. Second one was several very prominent attorneys in the U.S. If I mentioned these names, you would know who they are. encourage, as a strategy, DOJ to sue the state of Colorado for, I guess, preemptive, taking, I'm not a lawyer, so the supremacy clause, you've overstepped your bounds, Colorado. She was acting in a federal capacity as a federal election. Sue, and at a minimum, do amicus briefs into the courts, and then also recommend a habeas brief, which she has filed. So she has filed, her attorneys, McSweeney, filed a habeas brief, I think to the state court, maybe even to the Supreme Court. And then the last thing, again, this is just us looking at it from the outside, no inside baseball knowledge on this, is if, as we understand, President Trump has been briefed and Elon has been briefed on the foreign interference, certainly in 2020, and why Elon told President Trump, you cannot use machines going forward, just can't. And this is a computer guy saying, it sounds like Mark Cook, you cannot use these things. And if that's the case, if there was foreign interference, if there is a national emergency because of that, are there things that the feds can do to, to acquire custody of Tina as a witness with special knowledge and particular knowledge, concerned about her health? Because it's only because of her that we have Mesa 1, 2, and 3. And if you watch that event on Saturday, every one of those technical experts said that was the Rosetta Stone. Without that, we wouldn't have really understood what's going on. Juan, anything else you want to add?
Well, somebody decided to run a leaf blower.
Of course.
You talk about the devil's minions. Let me just add this. So, what's amazing, the last time Tina and I were together was right here in Hawaii. And she was a guest of Jennifer and mine for a couple of weeks while we were working on the various aspects of her case. And I got a chance to go through much of the case itself with attorneys and other folks that have some legal background. I was astonished at just how crazy the court actions and filings were all the way through this case. The judge literally tried this case in the way that he did issue this court order and made it so that she could not present a defense. And then when went through the jury instructions, you look at it, the jury actually had no choice but to find her guilty based on the judge's instructions. So there was a lot of latitude there. And I think one of the more difficult things to watch is what the judge said at sentencing. And that was,
he was horrible. He was absolutely horrible, Juan. There's no question about it. He was terrible. And it became personal, with him. What a deplorable individual. I don't know where at this point, Juan and Matt, her case is on the state court appeal. I think from the perspective of a lawyer, I think it will be difficult for the federal government to be able to gain jurisdiction over her proceedings because they were all strictly state court matters and state court charges. But I do believe that there, as y'all have said, there is enormous pressure being exerted, and as y'all know, on the governor. And this may end up being a matter of political justice, a matter of the governor pardoning her. And what that's going to require or take to do, I don't know. But I do know that this is a horrible, horrible injustice. This lady was simply exposing corruption within our electronic-based voting system, had the courage to do it, and has been persecuted mercilessly ever since then. I put this, quite frankly, on the same level as the J6 defendant, equally deplorable. And, I'm not going to rest. I'm not going to stop talking about this. And I know that you guys are not going to rest until justice is done in this case.
Chris, if I could read you
well,
again.
let me just go ahead.
I was going to say, Juan, if I could
sorry.
just read a prominent attorney in the United States who, if I mention this person's name, you would know. No one would not know who this is. When he was showed the appeal, wrote about it, and Clemens thinks it's a great appeal as well, too. So this very accomplished lawyer said, yes, it's true about the federal 22-month obligation, and it's a good preemption defense to a state prosecution. If I'd been the state judge, I would have accepted the defense and dismissed the case. I don't know if Tina's lawyers made that argument to the state court or in any appeals she has completed or have underway. She should also try to seek state and or federal habeas relief, which she's now done,
on this same theory. Her lawyer should ask to meet with U.S. DOJ. I know they've been waiting for a U.S. attorney to be appointed in Colorado to see if they would file an amicus brief in support of her appeal or habeas petition or both. This DOJ should be receptive to doing that. I like to think that even if the state court system rules against her all the way up to the Colorado Supreme Court, that when she files for federal habeas, at least when she gets to the 10th Circuit, especially if she has a U.S. DOJ amicus brief in her corner, that they will grant habeas relief for her. Lord knows that if I were going to DOJ, I'd be arguing for her to get amicus support from U.S. DOJ at all possible court levels. And what I understand is that the person who wrote that is going to be going to DOJ.
Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful. Juan, did you want to add to that? I know this is a little tricky since you can't see us and we can't see you.
Yeah, let me just add this one thing.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn movie store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
As Trump has already demonstrated, he has a lot of latitude in things that he can do that have not been being exercised previously by other presidents, or at least not commonly, but he has kind of unleashed the whirlwind. And Colorado and its governor may decide to take a hard line here, but even within the Justice Department, within the relationships with the Colorado courts and the governor himself, there's a lot of room for Trump to examine various departments and budgets and hone his focus in on operations over at the Justice Department, as opposed to maybe all the states or other states. May very well decide to make a little bit of a career of examining what in the world is going on in Colorado. If they want to play that kind of a game, Trump has a lot of tools in the box, and he can make sure that they feel the pain or whatever positions toying with Trump at this point in time, thinking that there's nothing he can do. And only looking at this case, there's a lot that can be done looking into Colorado that will make it very painful. The nail that sticks up stands out, and this is one of the more important issues for Trump. And I think the more they push back on just basic, sound, legal operations. Look, Tina, this is a politically inspired and motivated operation against Tina. It's a fact of life. Yeah. So everybody knows it. The governor in Colorado knows it. This judge had a lot of room to give room for other people to come in and put their opinion in about her situation and this prosecution. And the judge wielded his power in a very, I think, improper way. And I think this is more and more commonly understood. 70-year-old mom with federal laws that also apply. I think he wanted to make a statement. He did. And now Trump and his team can make a statement, and the governor can weigh which way he wants to go. He will feel heat.
Yeah.
And there are absolutely, Juan, there's no question. Yeah. And there are very legitimate actions that the federal government and Trump can take with regard to the election system in Colorado. There's no doubt they have jurisdictional authority to look at that because their system handles federal elections. Well,
let me add one quick thing. I want to say something really, it's funny. I was thinking about when we had Tina over here, and she walked out the front door of the house and was on the deck. And within, a second, there was the biggest whale. Usually the whales are about a half mile out in front of the house when they want to breach and go, splashing away, etc. We had a whale that was about 300 yards out, closer than I've ever seen any of the whales, because there's reefs out front and they don't want to do this breaching in too close. And so here's a whale closer than I've ever seen. And it's just jumping and jumping and jumping for joy, whatever. I took that as Tina got to see that, and it was like a God moment. I'm here. We got you. She had the biggest smile you've ever seen, and was just so thrilled to get to take a break. It was her first vacation, literally, since this whole thing began. And so it was, someplace to just decompress a little bit. I took from that, there's a divine aspect to this whole thing. We've prayed with Tina extensively on this. She did what she believed was exactly what God wanted her to do. And by the way, of all the people, all the citizens in this country, Tina's the only one that got a before and after image of what's going on inside these vote machines.
Yeah.
Before Dominion did this work. No one else in the country, with all the efforts going on, got it before and after. She got it. And I think, as harsh as this has been, there's not very many people that would have held the course the way she has, and with the style that she has. She's been very resilient and determined. It's obvious why her son, made it the way he did in the service. He got that from his mom. And I think no matter what happens here, God's showing that he has his hand. That was like a personal thing for me. God's got this.
Yeah.
And when the justice system goes awry and people are trying to take this to a place it shouldn't go, she's an icon of the resistance against a system that has gone off the rails. Even if you agreed with the judicial system on some aspect of what she did as being wrong, the penalty, the judgment is completely out of whack. Justification for that was that Tina wasn't backing down. She wouldn't back down. Hey, she would do the same thing again if she was let loose. Well, they took her out of Robinson Clerk. And let me add one other thing. And we talked about this when I had Tina over here. I want to sue the state of Colorado for removing her from her elected office unjustly on falsehoods. There has not been a legal election in her county, Mesa County, since she was forcibly removed from office. No one else could have conducted an election in Mesa County lawfully, because the person running that election was not elected by the people of Mesa County. Their elections have been false ever since she was removed. Not one person in office in Mesa County is there legally right now.
Juan, you're so right. And you have the wherewithal to do something about this. So I also want to put this little idea in your back pocket. But I believe that every other county in the state of Colorado, with citizens who are like-minded, who believe in Tina, support Tina, should come together in a class action lawsuit against the state, saying that their elections have been rigged and have been completely fraudulent because of what Tina uncovered.
Yes, I think, let's put it this way again, Colorado, if they want to be the poster child for how elections have to be run or dealt with, or be the corrective actions, so be it. You want us to start with Colorado? Let's start with the illegalities, the falsehoods. And no, Tina, let me add one more thing. One of the great groups of people, stations, Matt, you're over there at PPN, Patriot Party News, when we needed money to have a recount in Tina's race to be the Secretary of State in Colorado, which was stolen from her. We had to raise, I think it was $300,000 on a dime. I mean, literally like in 24 hours. And the listeners over at PPN, there was money that came in from a number of places, but the majority of it came in on a moment's notice with less than 24 hours from PPN. And it wasn't just one donor. It was a whole pile of donors. And they paid for this recount, which in itself, the way that they do stuff there in Colorado is they put all this weight in there to make it impossible to get a recount. We did the impossible. American people supported what Tina had to do. When they got there, Mark Cook went in and they gave no notice they were doing the recount. We found out through the back door, raced to the location where they were doing it, and saw that they did all sorts of improprieties that were totally against Colorado law. And the recount that we spent massive money for was done so against Colorado law that there's a suit there. But in trying to pick which lane to go after, we had to focus on Tina.
Yeah.
There is still a major lawsuit against the state of Colorado for conducting the recount against, not in compliance at all with Colorado law. And so the long and short, we paid $250,000 to get ripped off again. Colorado has so many angles where they have just literally run roughshod in order to hold power. I don't believe that, I don't think the governor is in office legitimately. The Secretary of State, by the way, Secretary of State, a lot of people don't know this. She came out of the Obama administration, and there's all sorts of history with Jenna Griswold. What in the world is going on with Jenna Griswold? Why did they put her there? Why did they want her there in Colorado? They were building out there because if there was a problem with Washington, D.C., and it could be used as our national city, the fallback position was right there in Colorado with all of those facilities under the airport in the outlying hills. They were going to relocate what is our federal operations to Colorado. And they wanted all of these players in the state government to help protect the new fort when they got there. There's a lot of story here that's nowhere close to been told yet. And as we get Tina out, we're not walking away from Colorado. There's a problem, and Colorado is dead center within all the elections in the country.
Wow. And one thing that's been very encouraging for me this week was to see the Trump. I mean, not that we thought that he was going to let it go, but he's not letting it go. He's not letting 2020 and the truth about what happened go. We saw him on Brett Baier this week, which I find very ironic because Brett Baier has been the captain of Let's Deny the 2020 was rigged. But he went on his show and told him face to face that the country wouldn't be in this shape if 2020 was not rigged. How do you think, at what point does this start coming into affecting these secretaries of state, these different states? Because the rig didn't necessarily happen only in a centralized location. The states had to have been a party to it.
Danielle,
the elections are...
I think
go ahead.
You're right. And if you look at, I don't know if you watched Mark Mitchell this morning out of Asmussen on Bannon.
No.
And he was the most opinionated I've ever seen. And usually, he's a kind of a pollster. Hey, the numbers say this. But what the numbers said, because it was personal to him, he goes, these people, the amount of they stole money from my kids and sending them God knows where, enriching themselves. And as he said, we're at the end of the fourth turning. We thought that would be a World War III. We thought that would be maybe a financial collapse. No, it is this. Trump and Musk have exposed. They're kind of brilliant, right? Because it's like maybe like in the Super Bowl, right? With the Chiefs and the Eagles, they were focusing so much on Saquon Barkley, the Chiefs didn't watch the rest of the Eagles, right? So all the fury is going against Elon, and Trump is kind of 53% approval rating because, Elon's the man.
He's a decoy.
But what they're uncovering, and he was just going over the numbers, people are awake, and he goes, the Democrats, and I'll be fair, the Uniparty Republicans, who just want to go back to the way it was. I'm saying back to the state level. No. You have seen, I would call it a tectonic shift where people are going, we now know that the woman didn't get sawed in half. There were two in there, and we just saw how you did it, and we are not putting up with it.
Yeah. Juan, did you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, the king has no clothes. These guys are, this deep state is, people are seeing through it now. And, one of the most amazing things is all this USAID money.
Yeah.
It's stunning. For example, one of the things that I passed around yesterday, 4.4 billion with a B of USAID money. So money that's supposed to be going overseas to help in various places, in fact, went for a school and water district fund in Nevada. 4.4 billion. I mean, when you think of a state budget, you're talking numbers that are the state budget for the whole state of Utah. And that kind of money was spent just on their school and water district and from USAID. And what was it for? Weather control, cloud seeding.
Whoa.
What were they going to do with 4.4 billion for weather control and cloud seeding over Colorado? Supposedly to refill the reservoirs and the lake and all sorts. And that came from USAID. Does anybody over at USAID, what was the connection here to literally override a whole state budget with this money from the national side? And then, by the way, and I've talked about this since the fires in California started, we saw massive spraying, have satellite images of all this happening live, where spraying was occurring on the west side of Area 51, the most secret base in the U.S., continental U.S. And this aerial spraying was then being pushed using weather control systems that we have that are based out of that area, but we have them all across the country. And these systems are pretty unique. We can see them from the satellites, the way that they push the material in the atmosphere around. They pushed those materials to the west. This was an unusual wind event. Usually the Santa Anas, which come off the desert, dry air, and go out to sea, occur in September, October, a little bit into November. It's an annual thing. This time here it is all the way up in January, and then the intensity was very high with 80 plus 90 mile an hour winds. It was enhanced. It was not natural or normal. And what was happening was with these wind events and with the various tools, all of this material, which was silver oxide, it appears, was pushed over the LA basin precisely. And then using other tools caused to fall out of the air on the foliage around the LA basin. Silver oxide doesn't absorb water, but it likes to be close to it. It's the reason why water droplets form. We use it for cloud seeding to, like if an airport was foggy in the early days, I remember the early tests in the 60s, where they would rain silver oxide over a runway and it would cause the fog to form droplets and rain out, clearing a runway. And so when you do this and you sprayed all this material, massive amounts, and it fell over the LA basin, the other thing is this. When you have silver oxide present, if you're using a microwave type of a weapon, it becomes like a conductor and allows that energy to be dissipated into whatever it's on much more efficiently. In other words, you want to burn trees and foliage, it's like adding fire starter to your fire. And then it burns at an even hotter temperature. The reason I'm going into all those details, who funded that? Who authorized that? You cannot work on the most secure airspace in continental America without an executive approval for those activities. That had to be signed for by the president. to allow that activity to happen. It could not happen without an executive approval. And Biden had no idea what he was signing when I was in there. Who was in his ear? When you look at what the Speaker of the House, Johnson, said, he never once was allowed to meet with Biden without the head of CIA in the room with him. What the hell is going on over there?
Yeah.
And by the way, who's running those operations over there at the west side of Area 51? What was allowed to happen there? Who had the approval? Where'd the money come from? Are we going to find out that the CIA was running it through USAID, and then it's $4.4 billion with a B dollars to make sure that the fires in LA burned as hot as possible?
Well, we certainly, Juan, have a right to know the answer to that question. We absolutely have a right. And it is so, so sinister. It blows me away how broad-reaching all this is.
But Juan, do you think that the money for that has been dried up? Or they are still funded like residually, or they still have funding to conduct these operations to terrorize the American people until the money runs out?
Well, I think the money has stopped in its flow. Have we gone out and asked for the money back?
Right.
You're only, if you get right down to it, we're 3 weeks into this administration and the nose wheel is off the ground. Main gear hasn't even lifted off yet. Wait till Trump actually gets up to altitude and up to speed. We're early in these operations. And one of the things that everybody's waiting for is the other foot to drop as the first major arrests occur. We've already had a number. We've picked up a couple of spies already, but we're a ways from the main events, if you will. So everybody just needs to, as shocked as many people are with where we're at already, wait till we follow the money and find who was receiving the rest of it and under what auspices. And by the way, Matt, you might want to speak to this. There's been all sorts of false reporting about some of the folks that we deal with within the Patriot community receiving USAID money. And it's false. It's intended to cause division within our ranks and questioning. You want to answer that, Matt?
Sure. I know we saw some things where you see Joe Flynn and General Flynn and Laura Logan and others getting USAID funds. Well, Flynn is a friend. I mean, not close, but a friend. Laura Logan is a dear friend. And I shared it with General Flynn. And the person who put out there, and Juan knows this person, and he's actually a shrill for the left, said that basically Flynn and Laura got money from USAID. And Flynn said, I can tell you, he said, neither I nor Logan ever received one penny from USAID.
Not only that, but they wouldn't take it.
They wouldn't take it. And here's where people see things and they misconstrue, is that if, say, Laura was going over to report on Arab Spring, CBS or somebody working with CBS got it, and that helped fund that. Did she get the money? No.
Right.
But you're doing things that you don't even know. It's like John Dodson said with Fast and Furious, and then I saw it up close and personal, especially when you whistleblow, as we've seen repeatedly. It's amazing how all the whistleblowers, you get all the attacks, not the people who did the crime. It's the people who call out the issue. But it's John Dodson said, I always thought we were the good guys, but now I'm not so sure. Not that good people aren't trying to do the right thing in private organizations in government,
Right.
But sometimes you get snookered by people or organizations that you trust, and you think that you're doing the right thing, or you don't know what's happening. But Flynn and Laura and others, to me, it's a purposeful try to divide and conquer, because right now, if you look at the folks who are familiar with Colonel Boyd and the OODA loop, right? The Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Colonel Boyd, Air Force Colonel, he created the 16. He created the YF-17, which became the F-18. And interestingly, all the smart people at the air manufacturers couldn't make an aircraft worth a crap. And he, in his spare time, as the Air Force sent him to, I think it was going University of Georgia, he'd go in their computer labs at nighttime and make up these diagrams, energy maneuverability diagrams, that no other defense contractor ever even created. He had this insight. And I think right now what you're seeing with Trump and the team, and my personal comment, don't have any verification on this. The stuff we're seeing revealed, I got a feeling they knew this a long time ago. This is just being so the public can be brought along to see. You don't know how bad it is. Let me begin to show you. We're gonna ink it out. We know how bad it is. As Trump said, we're going to go to Education Department. We're going to go to the Pentagon. There's probably a reason the Pentagon has never passed an audit.
Yeah,
probably a reason.
Let me ask a quick question about this. What we're talking about here, we notice, and we've been noticing year after year after year, that these politicians, they go into office, particularly the federal politicians, they make $175,000, $200,000 a year or whatever it is. And time after time after time, they leave office multimillionaire. Now, I know that there are big special interest groups that, that pay them money, private special interest groups, and as corrupt as that is, but at least, you would think those are not tax dollars there. Is there a connection, though, between this USAID, this big scandal, this massive squandering and laundering of taxpayer money, and the financial enrichment of these politicians when they're leaving
I'd say yes.
office?
If I can, Chris, and then Juan, I'll have you chime in. A couple of different things. One, interesting how before all that broke, you saw Roger Stone, who I honestly talked to Juan about this. I honest to God think he's had a sincere come to Jesus moment in his life.
Yeah, he has.
He mentioned on that show, I'm going to talk about the Kennedy assassination and so forth. And, oh, by the way, the FBI just found 2,500 files that never were seen before, ever. Juan's kind of an expert on that whole thing. But he said, you're going to see people on both sides of the aisle with offshore bank accounts who were getting enriched. And then we see this USAID thing pop. So yeah, to your point, Chris, I think people are going to be shocked to see the bipartisan level of grift that's occurred in this country forever. As Mitchell said, Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen, for the last 50 years, we have been, he didn't say my word, not his, we've been screwed. The American public has been screwed.
Our money.
The money that you bust your buns for every day to earn, pay taxes on, has been used in color revolutions around the world, color revolutions here, a color revolution here, and for personal enrichment. So yeah, I think there's a tie to it. And if I can, real quickly, and I'm going to hand over to Juan. And they're still trying to do that. Ask your audience needs to ask. They need to call their representatives. Trump wants to do the Iron Dome, right? Wants to do it. Great. The concept. The American people might not know. And there's a great lieutenant general that I used to know when he was a Harrier Division head when I was the operations officer at a weapons school in Yuma, MOTS 1. He's now Lieutenant General Eric Smash Austin. He heads up McCITIC, Marine Corps Combat Development Command, has a lot of information on the 10 years of work between the U.S., primarily the Marine Corps, and the Israelis on the Iron Dome, right? You've got Iron Dome, got David Sling, and then you got Arrow. It's kind of a three-tiered approach to this. Also, there's DHS, DARPA, and Army's Futures Command that did something along the same lines 3 years ago. So there's a lot of, the reason I'm saying this is that get your audience ticked and energized. Missile Defense Agency, which is kind of run by Raytheon and Boeing and Northrop and all those folks, they want to do this all over again because it is manna from heaven. There's going to be a boatload of money coming down instead of saying, let's leverage what we have worked with the Israelis for the last 10, 15 years. And we've gotten over the last 3 years, we got a project, 2 different projects that were started. And instead, the MDA folks, Missile Defense Agency folks, want to have a self-licking ice cream cone and suck the money in. And I can tell you, having worked in acquisition, trying to take requirements and apply them to the acquisition, in the acquisition workforce, there are some great people that are, but you can Elon, if you're listening, you can eradicate 30% of the people and get 100% more efficient. Juan, over to you for any follow-up comments.
And Juan, before you go into it, I also want to just prime the pump for if you want to talk about how this may play into tax day this year, because I think so. There are plenty of people who are steamed enough to not pay their taxes because they don't believe that they should have paid for Guatemalan transgender surgeries or the kidnapping of thousands upon thousands of children from Guatemala. Why should we pay our taxes to thieves, criminals, and clowns who have done that?
Condoms for the Taliban.
Well, back to the, I knew of people, and I mean the early 80s, not the late 80s, who began to push back against the federal income tax on the basis that the federal government was using money to fund abortions, and it was unconstitutional. And so abortion became this issue that was this trigger. And so a lot of people stopped paying federal income tax or reporting. I knew a number of the people involved, Irwin Schiff, B. Kraft, there's a whole slew of them. And one of the key issues was the misuse of federal money on things that were unconstitutional. At that point in time, it was still early in these kinds of things. And it was a very tiny fraction of the population. Most people don't know it, but right now, today, this exact second, there's about 50 million people who, according to the way the rules are written, should be filing a federal return, who haven't filed one in 3 years or more. Think about that. On what basis? And you don't hear about that. Are 50 million being charged with crimes in federal courts? They're not. And the IRS and related operations, because there's other stuff out there, into the banking system, they pick and choose a few people to highlight and go after in order to spook and scare the rest. The reality is there's quite a large number that are getting bigger by the hour, by the minute, who have been prevailing against the IRS or just walking away and saying, not legal, not whatever. Why? Because the IRS is actually a private corporation based in Puerto Rico. Courts have found, I'm not saying this, courts here in the U.S. have found that the Internal Revenue Service is a private corporation utilizing government employees. How would you like to be a private corporation and then your employee workforce primarily is paid for by Uncle Sam?
Yeah. Zero overhead.
What a
By
good
the
deal.
way, Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. It's a private banking corporation. They've been working in tandem. So let me add one more thing. When the banks are closing people's accounts because they don't like your politics. I was over in England with Nigel Farage this last summer. And one of the things that he brought up in the course of the conversation was the debanking of people who did not have political views in alignment with the people in power at the time. Think of all the people who got debanked over the last several years because somebody inside the banking system didn't like their politics. They weren't diverse enough in their understanding. They said something publicly that ticked somebody off. You're in a private banking operation, which the Federal Reserve is at the top and providing the money to under nefarious auspices. That whole thing is going to have to be unwound. And Trump has said, no more IRS.
Yeah, he has,
it's not legal.
Juan, he has said no more IRS. In fact, Trump has made a direct connection between his imposition of tariffs and the ultimate demise of the income tax and the abolition of the IRS. In fact, it's Trump's view that the IRS in 1913, when it was established, took the place of tariffs, which was the principal source of revenue for the government before that. So I think that Trump is very serious about ushering in the demise of the IRS. I agree
Yeah.
with you there.
And on the topic of being debanked, our listeners may not know this, but we were removed from Stripe. We got booted off of the platform. They said we did not meet community guidelines. And thankfully, we had a backup plan with this great organization called Revere Payments. So if anyone is looking for a patriotic, God-fearing group of people who want to who need a payment processor, just drop me a line, because Revere has been amazing. They've given me their cell phone number. These people are the real deal. But they really saved us when Stripe totally pulled the rug out from under us.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
remember, part
outstanding.
of the issue here is that these systems, that you can't operate in this country without a bank. You can't cash a check. You can't take payment.
Yeah.
So totally politically motivated to stop us from being able to function at any level. And with the full force and weight of the federal system protecting them. Well, you've been debanked. Well, it is a private group. So, they have the rights to, as a private business, decide if they want to let you bank or not. No, they don't. Not in those types of institutions, and not for those kind of reasons. That's why you have a Congress, congressional oversight, senatorial oversight at the banking committee.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this, but when I was working whitewater down in Arkansas, the agency of government that took the helm in looking at what was going on in Arkansas at so many levels was the Senate Finance Oversight Committee. And why? Because everything that was going on there was related somehow to money flow. And at the end of the day, it was actually black money being run by CIA back into accounts. All of that money going out on USAID projects, how did it get into Americans' hands clean and corporations' hands clean without understanding it was USAID money? It was coming in because they were buying offshore bonds, buying from offshore bonds in the stock market. And so in Arkansas, it was Arkansas Development Finance Authority that would issue a state business development bond. They're a private organization, but they're guaranteed by the state, by the governor only, signs the thing, putting all the Arkansas taxpayers on the hook for it. They would issue a bond. Who wrote this bond up? Rose Law Firm, where Hillary worked, where Vince Foster worked, where Webb Hubbell worked. They would create a bond for some business development project. It would be listed on the U.S. stock exchange in the bond market. And then people offshore would buy that bond, and the money would go into the account at ADFA, and then they would loan it to people. Well, where was the money coming from? USAID. USAID money was coming back in through the stock market, through the bond market, into Nebraska Development Finance Authority, Illinois Development Finance Authority, Louisiana Development Finance Authority, and then they were loaning it out at a dozen finance authorities across the country. They were loaning it back out. First off, how much money do you pay in taxes on a loan? Zero. They were getting loans from the pseudo-public private bond issuing company and for development operations. And if you didn't pay the money back, if it was actually your money, nobody's complaining because you never made a payment back. It was free and clear money. Nobody was looking. ADFA virtually never received one payment for any of the bonds that it issued. Billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in bond money was paid out. So you had to pay taxes on all the money you received. They didn't pay zip. And what were they doing? Money laundering, but not just drug money. Money from the American taxpayers going out into ADFA, coming back in through the bond market. How are these people such brilliant businessmen with their $30 million homes? Because they're getting loaned back money tax-free forever. It's hard for you to compete with a business that gets free, that doesn't pay any taxes on huge volumes of money that it gets through all their friends and everybody else back through USA. And by the way, just yesterday, looking at a situation in one of the island countries, and a university here in the U.S. better be looking over their shoulder, one of the biggest ones in the country. We just figured it out. They were getting USAID money in an offshore location on falsehoods for certain discoveries that they made that USAID helped pay for. And then the money comes back in through the university system to support certain university projects. Tens and tens and tens and tens of millions on this one little tiny project. What do you think we're going to find when we roll the rock over on that baby? I'll bet you I'm going to find 100 universities getting USAID money, not in tiny amounts, for projects outside the country. How do they have all this money to be in 50 countries as a university, running all these various projects that are all costing tens and tens of millions of dollars? Money that if you had it here in the States would build whole wings of projects. They were picking the universities, giving them this money, and it was USAID, CIA money. One last little point. When, in 1975, during the Church Committee hearings, the director of the CIA testified before the Church Committee, he said that every single USAID employee working in Central and South America was actually a CIA employee.
This is just extraordinary.
Think about that.
I can't even, it's just hard to wrap my arms around the level of corruption, Juan and Matt, that we're dealing with here. It is absolutely extraordinary. And it certainly explains why these nefarious actors are so panic-stricken.
Yeah.
And why they pulled out all the stops to keep Trump from getting elected, because they knew that all of this would be coming if he was elected.
Do you think, Juan and Matt, that this extends to venture capital? Because, sorry for that, I'm supposed to take my supplements. All right, we're having all kind of issues. That was my alarm.
I was about to ask you to dance.
I thought we're having a Broadway show.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought, but do you think that the venture capital funds are funded this way as well? Because they do pick the winners, right? You think about these universities, then I kind of just wonder, like the hedge funds, the venture capitalists that are backing companies that end up being the ultimate winners, right? Airbnb, Uber, Amazon. Is there a connection there, or am I just grasping?
Well, let me just answer this, Matt, real quick. One of the things that's really critical that people understand, this money from USAID predominantly, it goes to projects that favor certain people or locations. You know, again, $4.4 billion from USAID for a weather control operation over the United States, specifically run through Nevada. That's an insane amount of money. It's hard to even get your mind around, but let's say that you're one of the contractors involved in that operation, the maintenance of the aircraft, the actual supply. $4.4 billion will buy a lot of silver oxide. You can't even begin to imagine that. But then also, if you know what the plan is, how that's going to be used, going to cause droughts, it's going to cause rain. Can you get ahead of that and benefit by that? If USAID has that much money to loan or to give grant into the U.S. system just for weather control, how many other places are they putting it in to promote? Remember, the money that I just mentioned in this offshore location was given in an obscure, from an economy standpoint, out of 180 countries, probably 150th or 60th economically in the world. And then they got millions of dollars on a falsehood to pump through the university system from that island location. Why did they do it from there? Because it just looks like they're getting help to do something from a government agency. No, they were getting money to push certain projects all the way back in their university that no sane person would ever promote. And then they're acting like the money is being donated by big money people. No, it wasn't. That was a black bag operation to money launder stuff into the university system to promote other projects that you and I would never support, and probably none of the real people investing in the university system, former students like that, would ever promote. Somebody was getting payoff money to do a special project somewhere. It came in on one auspices, went out on another. USAID is going to be key to a lot of what's going on here. When you say venture capital, again, this money being laundered through people like ADFA and stuff like that, those were huge corporations that were receiving billions from ADFA and all the other development finance authorities. If you're a big business with $5 or $10 billion annual revenue and you get $1 billion or $2 billion tax-free, I think you can afford to give a bit to a venture capital operation by a couple of friends and buddies, the children of other politicians, etc., to do some special project. Remember, watch the kids. What was going on with Hunter Biden? What's going on with Pelosi's son? What's going on with some of these other people similarly?
Soros, Chelsea Clinton.
McCain, Soros, etc. Yeah. How are those kids getting all this money favoring their special projects? And it's coming from venture capitalists who think it's a great idea. You've got a real winner. Well,
it's not their money.
They're not paying taxes on the money they're getting. They're getting free money, and they're giving a percentage of it to certain operations on purpose. And by the way, you mentioned Soros. Soros is a British operative, British intelligence, that whole family operation out of the Bank of England. Don't be deceived by that. Soros is not his own man. That entire thing is a black bag operation for British intelligence. And we have similar stuff here. Zuckerberg is a creation of DARPA. He never invented Facebook. That was called LifeLog over at DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Program. He was given Facebook. Who has the authority to give somebody an operation they knew was going to be worth $1 trillion in a matter of years? Zuckerberg was given that. He's not his own man. Where did the drop boxes come from for the election?
Yeah.
You're looking at a creation of powers behind the throne you don't even know the names of, that are redirecting America in ways that we wouldn't have gone, that own the future, just like Facebook was the future. And that's only one of numerous operations.
Yeah. And I guess we should...
Origins of Walmart and other operations, okay? And that's why even taking control of the helm of the ship over there at Elon's operations is an interesting little side note. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Hey, Danielle, I was going to say before we wrap up, I know we're about an hour and 7 into this, is follow up from what we did in Virginia in January. And we, after the kind of the event on Tuesday, Wednesday, we had a brief from some folks who were involved with a lot of the folks who are uncovering what happened in 2020, 2022, 2024. And if I could just leave with the audience, what we were presented was kind of jaw drop. People's jaws were dropping as networks were laid out, who's who in the zoo, names of people here in this country, names in other countries. But literally the weekend after that, so Trump gets inaugurated on that Monday, we have an event on Tuesday. Wednesday, we have these briefs. And then by that weekend, they all go quiet because, from what we understand, DOJ's involved. They know They, as Juan will say, 2020, it ain't over yet, and neither is 2022 or 2024.
Great.
I'll leave a little tidbit we got in this presentation, and Juan, any final comments you want to give? They said, Kamala was so confident, right? The day before, everything was going to be fine. And this gentleman who was presenting to us, who has presented to a U.S. attorney, a senior FBI agent, Elon Musk, everything, said, yeah, about 9 o'clock at night, they thought something for 2024 election, they thought something was going to happen, and it didn't.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It is beautiful.
Well, the one thing I want to say is this. So we have the persons and the details, everything needed to establish in a world court, as well as a U.S. court, that the 2020 election was stolen. Let me add this. Those people have stated when interviewed that they turned the elections in 72 countries during these 2 decades they were in operation. So think about that. 72 countries have leadership up and down in the ballot who are not representative of them. The people put in power were not the people they elected. They're the people that were selected, and their choice was overridden. We have a lot of work in front of us. So when we show that 2020 was a stolen election, and you had 4 years of senior leadership in America, not just the presidency, that were not the will of the people, and all of the insanity that happened over those years and other elections prior to that. We have to go out once we get our situation under control and revealed, and go back out and help all of those countries regain control of the helm of their ships of state. One of the most egregious and dangerous and most disconcerting is South Korea, where their president and a number of the people who would have come into office after him are all sitting in jail. Very, very tenuous circumstances. I'm very concerned about the health of the now former president of South Korea. And the reason that he was put in jail is because he did an operation based on Korean law. The only way he could go in and get to the election system was during a period under martial law. And so they did a 24-hour martial law to get access, but they unfortunately went to the wrong area and didn't have perfect information going in there. So he is now sitting in jail, just like they would have had Trump in jail if they'd succeeded here. And this is one of our most crucial allies, a gateway to Japan and Southeast Asia. And China's operatives now are firmly in control of the operations in South Korea. We've had deployments now since Trump got into office to reinforce our bases in South Korea. This situation in South Korea is crucial, and it's the same crew who stole the election in the spring of 2024 in April, as we're trying to steal the election this time around with Trump, and stole it 4 years ago and put Biden in office. This is a world crisis on the vote stuff. Just because we get things under control here in the state somewhat doesn't mean it's over. You got the whole world. 2020, it's not over.
Danielle, and the person who briefed us, just so I can reinforce, this is people who briefed Elon and everybody else and said, early voting, do not do it. No, 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 no. The only reason Trump was able to overcome that because was the sheer numbers, right? It blows the algorithm out. He goes, but as an example, and I'll just leave you with this, he cited Maricopa County in 2020. The steal actually occurred 18 through 21 October. That's when it all happened. He said, please do not early vote. Terrible. You are telling, because remember, in the election management system, when you read the registration, it's all tied in there. When you tabulate even early, it sees how you voted. They know how you voted. They know what is that trajectory they got to get on, that set point, to get to the result they want. But again, Maricopa, 2020, bulk of it occurred 18 to 20.
Yeah. Gentlemen, there is an awful lot of work left to do, but I think that our man at the helm is up to it, as are
that
we.
man up there.
Yeah.
And that man ultimately, and we will get it done. It's such a pleasure to have you guys on the show always. Before you go, I want to remind our listeners this Thursday, and Matt, this will be of some interest to you. As a military man, we're going to have Stephen Simmons on the show to talk about Trump's rescission of the dismissal of service members who refused to get the COVID shot, reinstatement with back pay, and what an issue that begs for justice. That'll be this Thursday, so make sure that everybody tunes into the State of Freedom. Gentlemen, as always,
wonderful.
such a pleasure.
I'd love to see Tommy Waller get back in because he was forced out.
Yeah.
What a good man. What
Yes.
a good man. We love you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless you all. Juan, go have a
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.